Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Munoz, CEO of the experience agency, D-Flash. Each week, I bring on a different business leader who's doing some really awesome and game-changing work. And as we're in this really unique time during COVID, it's really important to see how companies are building, pivoting, moving to be smarter, faster, and better. So I'm so excited to have Megan Cunningham, who's the founder and CEO of Magnet Media. She is an OG of the video space and so much more. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. Take a listen. Hey, Megan.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hanging out in a tin can inside Manhattan. How about you?
I'm sending you a virtual hug. How about that?
It is received. Thanks. So even though we are in the middle of a very unusual and chaotic time in our country, the podcast isn't changing. So the first question remains the same. And you've been an avid listener, so you know the deal. Megan, what was your first job?
My first job was working at the Trumbull, Connecticut Mall, where they hired sort of extra capacity, part-time, temporary workers at the end of the season to help them with inventory. And I thought this was like the most exciting opportunity. We filled out the application, me and my best friend, and we started the next day. It was like a thrilling, like we're now, almost like adults, even though we were teenagers. And we went into the mall and we were, holding our heads high, and the woman opened up the dressing room and there was a pile as tall as us of clothing on the floor. And she said, "Welcome to work, girls, get started." And I remember feeling like, oh my God, this is the most boring thing I've ever done.
Oh, damn.
Very, very long day. And we had to scan all of the SKUs and then hand write in the inventory numbers and colors and sizes and put them back on the rack. And it was, of course, like, a simple hourly wage job. But I will never forget that for two reasons. And one was that the role itself, both that role and in waitressing, which I did a lot of later in college, made me really commit to never disrespecting people who were in those jobs. Because I remember thinking, anyone who's doing this for more than the few weeks that I've signed up for it has a lot more stamina and endurance than I could ever imagine. So that was the first takeaway. And the second was the fact that, there's beauty in every profession. And I really admired the colleagues of mine that were there full time and that made a career out of working in those positions. And they did it with dignity and style. And they always were much more fashionable than I've ever been. And and so I really liked that eye-opening perspective that this was somebody's dream career. It might not have been my talent or passion, but I liked learning that there were all kinds of different dreams that people were fulfilling.
That's awesome and so true. It's like I feel like everyone should work in retail in some way, shape, or form before you have any other job, because you need to know what that world is like. Because once you've done that, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I can be nice to people because this is not easy at all.
Oh my gosh. And when you're in a store, especially a clothing store, the tendency is just like, I don't like this one. Let me just throw it back, or leave it in the dressing room for God's sakes, or not even put it on the hanger. And, we've all done that. I've been guilty of that, running to meet somebody and just, feeling frustrated that something didn't fit, that you thought was going to fit, whatever. And the fact is that, putting it back on a hanger, treating that piece of clothing and the person who works there with dignity and respect is so simple, and yet compounded when you don't do that, it makes someone else's life hell. And I remember thinking that I will never leave a piece of clothing on the floor when I try on a dress.
Right. I always put everything back on the hanger. Like I try and fold something back if I've opened up a shirt on that's been on like one of the tables, because I'm like, I know how long it takes to do all this stuff. And you usually have a jerk for a boss who's gonna make your life living hell if you don't do it properly.
You got it.
So yeah.
Simple things.
Simple stuff. Okay, so you went from the mountain of clothing where you're like, oh my God, never again. So what was the journey to get to Magnet Media?
Yeah, thanks for asking. My dream, well, first of all, I've always been a storyteller. And so I still to this day see that as my core superpower. But back when I started out in the media industry, I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. And I was making projects on the side with my friends and guerrilla activist videos. We were very activist in AIDS education and in feminist work. But this was, of course, before YouTube. And so there was, a lot of tedium in terms of distributing content and finding an audience. And so that's a whole other topic that I can tell you about at another time. But the short story is I went to work at PBS and HBO. And I was thrilled at these, high flying freelance opportunities where I get to work with, successful filmmakers. And about 3 or 4 months into these jobs, I realized I really don't enjoy the day-to-day work at all. And I thought to myself, like, okay, I am really shocked by this because this is something that I've been working and interning all throughout my college career and just so, chomping at the bit to get into a film or television position. And I absolutely hate this kind of production. What is it about that that's making me so frustrated? And what happened was I went out to lunch with my mentor, Larry Silk at the time, who's a great editor. He was there at the sort of beginning of social justice television when he was a teenager. And when I started to work with him, he was in the twilight of his career. But he said to me, he's like, Megan, I hear everything that you're saying and that you're trying to do. And, you're really creative and you're really hardworking. You're really smart. And I thought, oh God, finally someone's noticing. And he said, but the thing about that is, you're in this elite little circle of up and coming filmmakers and everybody here is really creative and smart and hardworking. And I was immediately deflated. And he said, the thing that makes you different is you're good at computers.
You're aging yourself right now, Megan. Just saying.
It was really like the onset of digital production where avids were taking over the independent film world. They'd moved from Hollywood to indie world. And he was, in his 60s at the time and not, so comfortable with that progression. And so we relied on young people like me. And I thought to myself, oh my God, am I going to be like wrapping cables and troubleshooting like operating systems for the rest of my life? Like this is a horrible future. And I can't believe that I'm so misunderstood. And if I'm the most technical person here, coming from a liberal arts background, we're all in trouble. And what happened was I took that advice to heart as much as it was a hard pill to swallow. And I said, well, maybe I can make something of this. My next job was at a startup that was serving the entertainment industry. It's called Virtual Media. And I replied through a classified ad, this is in the late 90s, to a ground floor opportunity. And what I didn't realize was that it was just the founder and me. And
oopsie.
It was like a glorified internship, but it paid. And so I took this job. And the good fortune that I had was that the founder, Scott Greenberg, was actually a very talented entrepreneur. And he had ridden the IPO ride of Avid Technology and now is starting his own firm. And I was his first real hire after the receptionist. And so the two of us put our heads together and he told me everything that it would take to, build a startup. We were sort of making it up as we went along. But by the end of a 3-year journey, I had hired 50 people and we were running this $20 million company without outside investment. And it was this thrilling ride. And I thought, wow, if this is what startups are like I can't get enough of it. Having said that, I really want to go back to the production side. And so as I was talking to Scott about what my next move would be, he said, you can't just go back to like working in a basement editing room with some filmmaker. Why don't you go start your own company? So at the ripe old age of 27, I started Magnet Media.
Wow. And you're like, I'm just going to go do this. Okay. Because I'm good at computers.
That's exactly it.
These are the best plans. I'm going to guess there was no business plan here. There was just like, oh, I'm just going to go do this.
I did write a business plan. It obviously changed over the last 20 years, but I will say that the mission has remained the same, and that is telling stories that matter. It was really personally shocking to me how non-diverse the media and entertainment industry was. And I don't know why I was shocked by that, but I was. And it really took, I think, working on the inside in corporate media to have these revelations that just because you sit at a big desk or have a fancy office doesn't mean that you have cornered the market on quality storytelling. And there's so many opportunities to tell meaningful stories in different ways, in short form fashion, in faster production, more nimble production. And so we were really, you introduced me as the OG of brand storytelling, and I really appreciate that. But we really were at the forefront of this idea that armed with the right technology and workflow, you can produce a story quickly and at a high quality level that is creative and moves people to action. And so we've applied that to a number of brands over the years. Our first client was Apple, and we subsequently worked up and down the peninsula to secure contracts with most of Silicon Valley, Microsoft, Adobe, Intel, IBM. And then we did the same thing on the East Coast with financial services clients. And so we really have this roster of exciting brands, Goldman Sachs, Airbnb, TED Talks, et cetera, that fall into those three buckets: technology, media and entertainment, and financial services. But the commonality is that they're all brands that want to tell their story in meaningful ways, and that are data driven. And so that's really our secret sauce, is that we use storytelling and data to drive meaningful outcomes.
Awesome. And I'm sure right now, like, how are you all able to do this? Because I think a lot of folks are like, well, everything is video now. And how do we tell these stories across all these different platforms authentically? Mm-hmm. So as COVID's hit, and we're now in month 3, 11,000, 10,000, I don't even know anymore, and in the middle of racial unrest across the country, how do you guys guide your clients?
Yeah. It's a complex time for sure. I'm not going to lie. But I think that the value of our process and our history is really sort of at the maximum level at this point. And that's not to be, without hubris. I'm really trying to be clear about sort of, where we step in, and it's not to kind of take over the brand story and grab the mic from these brands and tell the story for them. It's a much more collaborative process. We have a system called Think, Make, Reach, and that's our unique approach, where we have a strategy phase, a production phase, and a distribution phase. And in the think phase is really that nuance of working out, how are you going to respond to the fact that racism and diversity are gaining this renewed focus after, protests and, the murder of George Floyd and many, many others. How are you going to respond? What is an appropriate response that makes sense from where you sit in the marketplace, that aligns with your values and mission, that feels authentic, that is true, a true story. And that really addresses the demand that consumers have of all business leaders to lean into their purpose and mission. And so that's really the strategy piece of it, is we use search and social data and also our own creative thinking around crafting the story and figuring out what the right platform is going to be. And then the make phase is interesting right now as well, because we can't be in a studio or, flying to different countries. But fortunately, Magnet's team includes local crews in 18 countries. And so we're able to remotely and safely, with the guidelines of the CDC, produce content. We also have a self-filming playbook. And one recent example of this was we worked with the founders of Chief, one of my favorite startups, to capture over 40 members in a self-filmed capacity that looks like they were shot professionally. Simply by using our self-filming playbook, we captured 40 senior executives and edited them with archival footage and music, all in the space of 2 weeks.
Wow.
I know. So
I saw that video. I would never have guessed. It's awesome. I remember seeing the video.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so our creative team is really built for this moment from a remote production perspective. And then the last piece is just around reach, which is, thinking about these topics that journalists are covering, both diversity and racism, of course, but then also the health crisis. And then on the third level, of course, the economic crisis. And really in those three arenas, how are brands really taking part in that conversation? What are they contributing that's adding value to the media and to social channels directly to their consumers?
Well, how do you? I mean, I think that's, like, be smart, brands, like, and also hire you guys. But yeah, I think that's a really important part of this. I think a lot of times folks feel like, oh, well, we can just sort of opt out. And I'm like, well, no, you can't. Like, I think this is the first time probably in our history where, like, if you're a brand, you have to take a stand. Like, there is no sideline for you to sit on and watch and see what happens.
Absolutely. I was speaking yesterday to a very innovative thought leader who's a colleague of ours who formerly worked at Adobe in their social impact and CSR capacity. But she was saying, Megan, there's so much conservatism right beneath the surface of, and fear where, brands who have good intentions or leaders who are, trying to be inclusive are terrified of, saying the wrong thing, choosing the wrong word, being too controversial. And I completely respect that this is very complex territory. But what I don't accept is silence. I do believe that silence is making its own statement right now, and that is not a positive one.
Yeah, silence is complicity at this point. Like, I think there's that famous Elie Wiesel quote, like, the people who are neutral are actually the ones who are the worst in this influence, because you can choose to be neutral and say, well, just sort of stay out of it. Like, yeah, but you really can't because it's either you're anti-racist or you're not. Like, it's not, I hope it will be. Like, yeah, no. It's, and then also it's a matter of, as you were talking earlier about, and looking internally, like what are your own company policies? How are you treating your own employees so that they feel welcome and they feel inspired to want to work for you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's probably the place where you can make the most immediate impact, if I'm honest. And, we are far from perfect. Even being founded on that mission of telling stories that matter, there are many overlooked opportunities and gaps in our own team and in my own leadership. And so this has been a time for me to listen as well. And we are bringing in actually a facilitator to have conversations about racism and our values, and ensuring that we really commit in meaningful ways that are public, and that we hold ourselves accountable to diversifying our organization even further, to becoming a more inclusive culture. And for all of us who are all on a journey, let's be honest, to educate ourselves and to invest in personal growth.
It's key. I think it's just being open to education, because, as I said to many folks, it's like, think of today as your first day. Mm-hmm. And yeah, whatever happened in the past happened in the past, but like, now you can choose to listen, to learn, and then to act meaningfully. Because, all right, well, we got it. You didn't realize, you didn't know. And I think whatever that might be, totally understand. But I think if you look forward and not look back, that's how we can be better. We can all be better.
I think that's such an important point, and focusing on forward is on moving forward is a really empowering attitude. How do I become a better ally? I mean, that's a question I've asked myself every day. How can I support, Black journalism organizations and volunteer and build more mentoring programs and contribute to crowdsourced initiatives that my friends are leading? I mean, all of these are ways that they don't require that you're rich and powerful. They don't require that you have 100,000 person organization. And, hopefully they're the types of actions that all of us can take, not just tomorrow on Juneteenth, which I will be taking those actions tomorrow, but every day and every week from here on out.
Awesome. And so true is, I think, now is the time to move. Now the time to act. But it's like, you don't need $1 million to solve this problem. Like, it's like, have you talked to your racist uncle? Okay. Step one. I mean, literally that's what it is. I mean, I had this conversation with someone I went to junior high school with, and, I was like, he's like, my dad is horrible. And I'm like, have you had that chat?
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's like a little really cool thing on Instagram going around. So I sent it to him, and it was like basically all the responses to like the comment, well, I don't see color. I never owned slaves. Why is this my issue? Like, I'm not racist, and it had all the right answers for like white people to have other white people to respond to. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is perfect. Cause like, I don't have all the answers. And honestly, I can't be the person who answers these questions for you. Like, you have to go find the answers on your own and do the reading. So, but I can point you in the right direction of tools that you can use, because if we do that, then lo and behold, you all will get better. And you'll be more authentic with it, where you won't need us. Like, I love when like my white friends start calling out my other white friends, and I'm like, woo, I'm gonna watch this with popcorn. This is precious, and I'm not saying a damn word. But still, I think, for Black people in the country right now, it is scary, weird, stressful, and exhausting, but also hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, for a lot of folks, we're like, this is what I've been telling you, or like, duh, or like, I've never spoken up about this because I didn't want to lose my job, and now I feel like I can actually talk about it. So it is opening up so many new dialogues that I hope will continue and won't be a flavor of the month by September.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think, it comes at this really awesome week in some ways, where the Supreme Court is making, major decisions, both about Dreamers and about, gay bias at work. And not being able, the decision to not be able to fire somebody for coming out, and the decision to, permit Dreamers to stay in this country is just, those are two like breakthrough moments. And I am in shock and awe. I feel like I'm going to wake up and they're not going to be true. But that really inspired me to say, you know what, as horrible as our political climate is right now, as insane as our White House has been behaving, perhaps there is the ability to have some justice here that's meaningful and longstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I've been cautiously optimistic. I mean, on Monday we had the LGBTQ rights upheld, like, oh my God, you can't fire someone for being gay. Like, why was that allowed in the first place?
I know.
And then
Small victories, Laura, small victories.
I know. Well, that's the thing. But this is also the thing, like, protests are working. I think that you folks, like, pay attention. This is why you need to be in the streets. Mm-hmm. Like, and then with DACA being held up, I was like, are you serious? And I think, again, it's like, for whatever it may be with the Supreme Court, I think that they do realize that they sit on the arc of history. Mm-hmm. And do they want to be responsible for, one, like, selfishly more unrest? Let's be real about it. And two, like, things could hopefully change come November. And if that's and it will be in a massive swing the other direction. Mm-hmm. And when that's the case, speaking in the present tense, these changes are going to have to be, like, enshrined and locked, so that it never opens this can of worms ever again, and we move to a more perfect union, as they say.
Absolutely. There's so much work that needs to be done, but I think it's these breakthrough moments that give us encouragement and galvanize us and lead us to have more energy to continue.
So, with all of this going on, and, like, because we seem to forget there's still a pandemic going on and we're still stuck at home.
Oh, there is? Thank you. I forgot about that.
I know. I mean, because you've been at your office every day, so it makes sense. what in the world are you doing for your self-care? Are you home? Are you at your childhood bedroom? Like how's that all managing for you?
Oh my goodness. I was listening to the beautiful interview that you conducted with Rebecca Minkoff, and I thought, like, she answers this question so eloquently, and I really don't. It's terrible. It's an area I really need to work on. But it's interesting. I think that I have been trying for years to meditate and to really commit to that on an ongoing basis and not feel like guilty if I skip a day, but really try as much as possible to put time aside, even if it's only a few minutes in the morning, 5, 7, 10, 12-minute meditations, nothing crazy, really starting the day that way rather than, waking up to email or Facebook or Twitter. And the reality is it's really changed my life. It gives me such clarity and strength. And when I don't meditate, I really feel the difference. And so that's one thing that I would really encourage everybody to do. The other is hydrating. It sounds so
with wine.
It sounds with 100% alcohol. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. No, I really tried, and again, this is something that I'm far from a perfect standard on this, but I'm really trying hard to have that gallon of water right by my Zoom calls, because we're not getting up and, kind of walking around the office and, hitting the water cooler, sadly. And I've gone in the beginning, I was just completely drained at the end of the day and feeling, exhausted and terrible, physically. Even if we had positive things happening from a business perspective, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the rewards of that. And I realized I just wasn't taking care of myself. And this is going to be, fruitless and debilitating if I don't start prioritizing that. So been trying to hydrate, been trying to meditate. Areas that I need to improve, I would say sleep.
What's that?
And always trying to increase the number of days that I exercise. I'm up to 4 to 5 right now, but they're modest, 30-minute commitments. And I would love to get to a place where I have an hour a day and I'm doing it 7 days a week. That's my gold standard.
Hey, listen, we all want to be at that gold standard, but it's a standard. It doesn't mean it actually has to happen. I was really good for like the last 8 weeks. I was in this 8-week training program. And then I did it and I was like, oh, this is awesome. And now it's been really hard for me to kind of get back to do the newest one that start up. Because I'm just like, wait, hold on. I just did this where I was because it's 5-6 days a week and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh. So, you sort of cycle through and, you'll get there.
That's an impressive commitment though. You're inspiring me.
Again, I was I have nothing else to do first thing in the morning anymore. So I might as well just do this. It's there is no commute anymore. That sort of makes it a little easier, but yeah, thanks. It was crazy. So as part of my series, interviewing folks during this very unusual time is whether or not you have a give and or an ask for the audience. So Megan, do you have a give or ask for the audience?
Wow, I love that question. So my give is I've joined forces with a CMO at a brand that I really respect. It's the sock company Bombas, and her name is Kate Hewitt. And she was inspired by a colleague of hers, Jessica McGlory, who suggested this campaign around Pay It Forward. And the idea is that she volunteered a bank of hours to mentor anyone at any stage in their career, as long as they're Black. And she put forth that commitment publicly and said, I've had access to mentors and networks that many people have not. And so I'm going to pay it forward and volunteer these hours for mentoring. And she set up a really efficient system where anyone can sign up for those hours. And she dedicated her time. And I saw her post, and, you know, I've met her a couple times. We're not like super close friends, but I saw it on LinkedIn and I said, you know what, I have to do this too. This is such a brilliant concept. And so I wrote her and I said, Kate, you know, I posted it publicly. If you hit capacity, I will match your hours and pay it forward as well. And I, of course, was not the only one that was inspired by her. And by the end of the week, she had a few dozen people that she put into a crowdsourced spreadsheet. And then within days after that, she had over 100, and then 300, and then 700. And last time I looked, it was nearly 1,000 senior executives from all over the country, mostly C-suite, that have volunteered their time for mentoring. And so that is my give, is to offer up this pay it forward mentoring invitation. And if you have notes in the program, I can link to the spreadsheet where everybody can sign up for this, for hours, not just with me, but with anyone that is volunteering through their Calendly link.
That is amazing and a phenomenal give. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. I think you're going to be overrun, darling. Just FYI. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll absolutely throw that in the show notes. And like, every time I talk to you, I always feel smarter. So I'm sure lots of really young folks will really appreciate having to, you know, pick your brain and some others in the industry. But also, as we all know, connections matter here. And so making those initial connections when you're first starting out, or whatever stage you might be, always help you get to where you need to go. So I think it's pretty amazing. That's awesome. Fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wish I could take credit for it, but it was Jessica's concept, and Kate was implementing in the scale. So really inspired by them. And then that ask, I would say, is if you're an executive and you like this concept, add your name to the list. I think, you know, again, I'll share the spreadsheet and it's open. She's setting up an even larger sort of way to matchmake between mentors and mentees. But I really can't say enough good things about the rewards that I've experienced from mentoring female founders and female directors and filmmakers over the last decade. I've just gotten more than I've put into it in spades. So really, if you are someone who has expertise, donate your time.
Exactly. I think, you know, remember I said, you know, every action can be so much more meaningful as starting today. So you're completely embodying that. So thank you so much, Megan.
Oh, thank you, Laura. This is just such a privilege to talk to you. And, you know, I enjoy our conversations immensely. And I was honored to be part of your very elite list of podcast guests here. They're all
awesome. Thanks so much. So we'll throw all the details in the show notes so you can find the spreadsheet that Megan has all the other amazing C-suite executives. And yeah, give her time or go and take some time with some really incredible people. I guarantee you it will be worth it. And so that is our show.